A brand new titanium paddle has released, and it's from one of the most talked about companies this year, Honolulu Pickleball. They bursted onto the scene with their original 16mm J2K 100% Kevlar paddle and have been producing some incredible paddles ever since. Will their new titanium paddle live up to the hype? Well, without further ado, let's dink straight into it. The J2Ti comes in at a price of $155, and you can use code STS10 to get 10% off, making the J2Ti just $139.50. Links in the description down below. So as we know from my last video and plenty of other videos in the space, are titanium paddles actually utilizing precious metal titanium? No, they are not. It started as a marketing play or possibly some miscommunication, I suppose, from the manufacturer, but here we are. Ultimately, if you want a mental idea of how to wrap your head around the face composition of this paddle, it is a polyester or synthetic silk material woven into carbon fiber, which gives a dampened feel and adds a nice plush nature to the paddle. One thing I really noticed right away with the J2Ti is the tactile feel of the face. You can definitely feel the grit and the weave. I was speaking with the owner about this, and he said not only do they do a specific weave to create grit, but they have been innovating their peel ply process to really push the boundaries of grit on their paddles, which ultimately results in more spin than the competition. And in my testing, it checks out. The paddle looks gorgeous. It definitely has a techie feel, and with those OG Honolulu graphics on the face, it is certainly an aesthetically pleasing paddle, at least to me. So when I was playing with the J2Ti, I went into it unbiased, because regardless if this is actual titanium or not, if I like a paddle and the way it plays, I don't care what the face material is made of. I just want a paddle that I love. And to be totally honest, I really love this paddle. It's basically the J2K with a touch better power and pop metrics, but with the same controllability. That slightly dampened feeling off the face from the polyester adding a plush nature maintains the control aspects that I love so much about the J2K. But the weave they chose to utilize here creates just a bit more power and pop overall. So regardless if this is utilizing actual titanium or not, it's a very good paddle. I aced more often on serves with the J2Ti than I did previously with the J2K. I noticed the face gripping the ball better on cross-court dinks and never had any issues with my resets or drops at all, given the slightly improved power and pop. The last general thing I will say is that I really have to give some props to Honolulu for marketing this paddle in a pure sense. On their website, they specifically call the surface material carbon fiber and PET electroplated fiber, aka titanium, which is an honest way of marketing this, and they aren't just trying to use wordplay to confuse the buyer, which I fully respect. Okay, let's jump into some metrics. Here's the full breakdown of the J2Ti, with notable metrics being the swing weight of 113.12 and the twist weight of 6.93. It's a hybrid 16mm paddle with an overall length of 16.2 inches and has a grip length of 5.5 inches and a grip circumference of 4.125 inches, which is my preferred circumference. Spin-wise, the J2Ti comes in at 2237 RPM, which is absolutely top tier. Let's compare this to the original 16mm J2K, which came in at 2232 RPM, the bread and butter Shogun at 1998 RPM, and the Neonic Flare at 2058 RPM. We can see that the J2Ti has essentially the exact same spin rate as the original 16mm J2K and is the current highest spinning titanium weave paddle in my testing. My serves and drives with the J2Ti were dipping noticeably hard over the net, and that grip it has on the ball for flicks and rolls at the net is just awesome. There is no sense of the ball sliding or that sort of unappealing feeling of the paddle face being too firm, with not enough friction where you feel like you can't control the ball's spin on shorter shots. You really get a solid grip on the ball from anywhere on the court, and I absolutely love that aspect about this paddle. Let's dive into the power and pop metrics for the J2Ti. Power-wise, it comes in at 9.3, and for pop, an 8.6. These are really solid metrics, especially given how good the control is, which we will dive into here shortly. Drives, serves, and hand battles at the net felt really solid and aggressive. Not crazy or Gen 3-esque, but still very solid. I would definitely place this paddle in the all-court category, but where the J2K was in the all-court category leaning control, I would say the J2Ti is an all-court paddle with a bonus of controllability, which you don't find in too many paddles. A lot of things are lining up here with the J2Ti in my experience. I kept thinking while I was playing with this paddle that it kind of has everything you want in a paddle and just does everything so darn well. Comparing it to its competition in the space, we have the 16mm J2K at a 9.2 for power and an 8.4 for pop, the bread and butter Shogun at a 9.1 for power and an 8.1 for pop, and the Neonic Flare at a 9 for power and an 8.5 for pop. So we can see it has slightly better power and pop than than the 16mm J2K and much better metrics for someone looking for an all-court paddle than the Shogun or the Flare. Sweet spot wise, the J2Ti comes in at a 9.3, tying with the 16mm J2K. I think both of these really have the best sweet spot of any hybrid paddle in the space, and I stand by that. The implementation of inner perimeter weight distribution that Honolulu Pickleball is utilizing gives these paddles a wonderful stock twist weight, which ultimately results in a really solid sweet spot overall. Off-center drives, serves, dinks, resets, and drops never felt overly harsh in their drop-off around the sweet spot, which is wonderful because I tend to miss the sweet spot more often than I would care to admit. Comparing these to the rest of the competition, we have the bread and butter Shogun at an 8.7 and the Neonic Flare at a 9.1 in the sweet spot category. Lastly, we have control, and this is where I was really surprised. I figured given the slight increase in power and pop, some of the more finesse shots would be just a touch less consistent overall with this paddle, and I was wrong. The controllability when you slow down and hit slower paced shots is absolutely top tier. It's a situation where you will have to try it to believe it, but it really is that good. So for control rating, the J2Ti comes in at a 9.2, tying it again with the 16mm J2K. We also have the bread and butter Shogun at an 8.6 for control and the Neonic Flare at a 9 for control rating. I did deduct a little bit more from the control rating on the Flare because the spin wasn't as high. I do really believe that utilizing spin to keep certain shots in the court or to dip them over the net is a solid factor when analyzing the controllability of a paddle, among many other things, but I do factor it in. So overall, the takeaway here is that this is a slightly more improved 16mm J2K, which is kind of crazy to me, to be totally honest. But again, this is why we must go into anything and everything with an open mind and just unbiasedly see what happens. In this case, it's a win. So you might be wondering, if you currently have a 16mm J2K, should you grab a J2Ti? I think if it's been used quite a bit and you're thinking about grabbing a paddle soon, I would snag one. But if it's a newer J2K, I would enjoy what you have because the differences aren't large enough to justify spending your hard-earned money on another paddle, unless you're a paddle junkie like me and you just want all of the cool new tech. The J2Ti is now my top pick for 2024 as it has really solid power and pop with plenty of controllability for the average pickleball player and absolutely top tier spin. Everyone from a beginner to a professional would do very well with this paddle. Like and subscribe to always be in the know. Have a freaking wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.